Sharma, and let's take a look at the top headlines of the hour. EU leaders meet in Copenhagen to discuss the drone war to strengthen Europe's defences amidst recent airspace violations. The summit also explores using frozen Russian assets to boost financial support for Ukraine as military aid from allies declines. After the meeting in Copenhagen, the French President Emmanuel Macron emphasizes urgent rearmament, while European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen urges unity amid rising drone threats and Russian aggression in the region. Germany is set to establish a joint drone defense center to coordinate threat analysis, risk assessment and operational response across federal and state levels. The initiative aims to strengthen national security and rising Russian drone incursions. The United States has issued formal security guarantees to Qatar following an Israeli strike last month. A White House order states any armed attack on Qatar will be seen as a threat to U.S. national security, allowing for diplomatic, economic or military response. Israeli Defense Minister has issued a final warning for Gaza City residents to flee south as military tightens encirclement. This comes as the U.S. President Donald Trump proposed a 20-point Gaza peace plan, which Hamas officials are yet to respond to. Italy and Greece have called on Israel to guarantee the safety of activists aboard the Gaza aid flotilla and to permit consular access. Both countries suggested delivering and through the Catholic Church to prevent direct confrontation, but the activists refused the proposal. A severe rainstorm in Odessa in Ukraine has claimed at least 9 lives, including a child, after the city was drenched with nearly 2 months' worth of rainfall in just 7 hours. A makeshift scaffolding collapsed at a church in Arerti in Ethiopia, killing at least 36 people and injuring 200. Many pilgrims remained trapped under rubble as rescuers worked tirelessly. The big story of the hour: the European leaders meet in Copenhagen amidst heightened security over recent Russian drone incursions and attacks on Danish airports. French President Emmanuel Macron said that the European Union leaders gathering in Copenhagen will focus on supporting Ukraine and boosting Europe's defense through the development of new capabilities. He spoke on the sidelines of the summit and said that Europe is in confrontation with Russia, emphasizing the urgency of the European Parliament. Listen in to what he said.
D'abord, nos travaux seront dédiés au soutien à l'Ukraine et à l'Europe de la défense. 2 sujets essentiels sur lesquels nous avons beaucoup poussé, ce qui permettra de faire le point sur les travaux de la coalition des volontaires, sur l'action que nous menons au soutien de l'Ukraine, sur les initiatives que nous voulons prendre aussi d'un point de vue opérationnel et financier. Et puis ensuite, il y a le développement d'une Europe de la défense. On s'est doté de capacités nouvelles avec ces prêts exceptionnels que nous sommes collectivement prêts à faire pour soutenir des programmes de défense, programme dit SAFE, avec une préférence européenne, ce qui était un tabou jusque-là. En tout cas, nous sommes dans une confrontation avec la Russie, qui depuis plusieurs années est un acteur très agressif dans notre espace informationnel. On l'a vu dans le cadre des élections comme ailleurs, qui multiplie les attaques cyber, qui évidemment a lancé une guerre d'agression en Ukraine, qui utilise la menace nucléaire et qui aujourd'hui, on le voit bien, provoque dans des espaces aériens. Tout ça est un ensemble hybride qui est dans le champ de la confrontation.
The EU summit in Copenhagen comes amidst heightened tensions as Denmark has faced a wave of unidentified drone activity in recent days, which has prompted airport closures and raising concerns over the potential hybrid attacks near military installations. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen also addressed the summit, vowing that Russia would not succeed in sowing division and anxiety across the European Union. She stressed the need for unity and resilience as the bloc confronts an evolving security landscape.
Is a pattern, and this pattern is coming from Russia insofar as Russia tries to test us, but Russia also tries to sow division and anxiety in our societies. We will not let this happen.
The summit is expected to discuss coordinated defense efforts, increased surveillance capabilities and joint responsibilities to cyber and aerial threats, signaling a significant shift in EU strategy towards long-term security preparedness. Let's discuss this with Mark Sutherland, who's joining me from London. Mark, thank you very much. And of course, a quick response from you with regards to the gathering that has taken place in Copenhagen. Do you think without United States involving itself in this border dispute, where there have been a number of drones that have been sighted, these incursions, it's not at this point of time very clear about whether these were Russian drones that invaded the airspace of Denmark, but questions are being raised and targets are being pointed at Russia. And to ensure the safety of the European Union nations, Copenhagen is hosting the leaders who are talking about imposing more tariffs, who are talking about imposing more sanctions, who are talking about fortifying their defense forces. How does this play out in the near future?
Mika, good to join you. And you're quite right in saying that the Copenhagen incursions, there's no proof whether that's come from Russia. Also, we remember recently there were drone incursions into Poland. One analysis you could argue is that this is Russian, particularly in Poland. Denmark is another issue, is turning around and disrupting things in that airspace because of their border. And then that means that maybe as it's already going to be discussed, as you've alluded to in the Copenhagen summit, so that NATO, the European countries, look at their assets, and that they may mean that they have to then put those assets to defending their own country instead of sending those assets with all the financial implications of that direct to Ukraine. Mika.
Right. Talking about, the European leaders came out, said we are going to support Ukraine, we are going to boost Europe's defense through development of new capabilities. What are these new capabilities that these European leaders are talking about, keeping in mind they are hugely dependent on American defense to support the Ukraine war?
Well, there was a discussion very shortly about asking the Americans then putting Tomahawk missiles into that theater of war, which have they can travel 1,000 miles, and they're talking about that. But the other reason why this discussion is going on is because it has financial implications, and that has always been put forward to then turn around, as the Finnish and the Swedish have done, by not coming out with an official paper, by actually putting something on the table that says that there are 200 billion worth of Russian assets in banks, and that 130 billion of that, which is going to be 130 billion needed to rebuild Ukraine, needs to then be used as collateral to push this forward. So there is this whole issue of how these things are going to be paid for, because the Americans are quite happy for the Ukrainians to then buy their weapons, to then put that into the theater of war, if they do not want to then necessarily be seen to even escalate their involvement, because President Trump, it has to be noted, has talked about the fact that the Europeans, you need to play a greater role within this. And we can ask ourselves, what were the Europeans trying to do over the last 4 years in regard to negotiating a settlement? Because soon after the Russian invasion in February 2022, there's always been this discussion that within a couple of weeks, there was a piece of paper to sign to then sort out a ceasefire and to then the end of war there and then. But politicians in the Western countries then didn't allow that to proceed. Mika.
Right. Absolutely. Stay on with me. There is more related development in this story. The Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson has now issued a statement on the use of frozen Russian assets, stating that Sweden is in favor of offensively using them. This comes as the EU leaders consider using the seized Russian assets to fund the loans to Ukraine. Russian assets worth $250 billion have been frozen in the European Union since the US and its allies have prohibited transactions with Russia's central bank and finance ministry. EU leaders have previously stated that Moscow could only get the money back if it compensates Kyiv. Earlier today, the Kremlin responded to the use of the frozen assets by Europe, stating that the theft of Russian funds would be held accountable. He also said that such moves destroy the trust in private property and would impact other depositors and investors as well. Meanwhile, the French president said that Europe needs to remain an attractive and reliable place for investments. He referenced Belgian Prime Minister's remark that Europe froze Russian assets as it respects international laws.
D'abord, je pense que nous avons besoin de rester une place attractive et fiable, nous Européens. C'est-à-dire que quand des avoirs sont gelés, on respecte le droit international. C'est ce qu'a rappelé aussi le Premier ministre belge. La deuxième chose, c'est qu'on doit donner de la visibilité à l'Ukraine en termes de financement. Et donc, c'est une très bonne chose que nous ayons une capacité financière à offrir pour accompagner son équipement en matière de défense, ses efforts macro-financiers.
Mark is back on the telecast with me. Mark, do shed some light into this back and forth that has been happening for over several months about how European Union wants to utilize the Russian frozen assets and loan it to Ukraine for its fight against Russia. Why has it not already been done?
Again, a very good question. Plus, I suppose you could caveat to say that that the European Union, they love their controls. They love the controls that are in place in regard to banking and all the legislation of that legally and what you have to adhere to is extremely stringent. They love all that. But I think the other thing is that the debate that's gone on is how much the Americans would be involved. How much more would the Americans then be providing weapons for the theater of war in regard to Ukraine? Under the Biden administration, there seemed at times to the flow was happening, and then it would cut off. And of course, that understandably caused a lot of angst within the American public, hence why one of the reasons why for voting in Donald Trump, who was then in the only way that he does is then saying, well, we need a better deal. We've been looking out taking minerals out of Ukraine for the amount of weapons that we have then put in. And then, of course, as I was alluded to earlier, over the fact that he has told the European countries that you really have to step up and play your part here. And as I said earlier, this always has cost implications. Now, because those cost implications are coming into play here, they're going to look at those Russian assets. And also remember that the European economies are not in a good place at all, and hence why it will be masked, in my opinion, why there's this debate, this conference in Copenhagen, which is to look at how the economies of the European Union could then be improved. And you and I need a discussion of at least a few hours just to discuss that one. Mika.
Yes, and then also talking about there have been more threats that have been issued by European Union, by NATO, that there are going to be more sanctions that are going to be imposed on Russia. Again, the same question, amidst all this deliberation that has been going on for months, is the European Union capable of putting more sanctions on Russia?
Well, recently there was putting forward to actually sanction another 2,330 companies, if I've got my facts correct. Plus, they haven't been this whole discussion which came from President Trump saying, well, as a European Union, you are technically financing this war that you want to end because of this whole thing of energy. But the sanctions, they wish to step up. They wish to put that forward. And of course, Donald Trump wants the barrel of oil, this whole thing of oil price in regard to Russia, as that is how they finance their war effort to go through the floor. That's why he has questioned India over buying oil from Russia and selling that on the open market. And of course, as we know, we're commenting earlier, China is now buying LNG, looking at that from liquid gas, natural gas, from Russia, from the Arctic area. So this, at times, economically, we look back and think this is deeply, deeply complicated, because the European Union go, yes, we'll put these sanctions in, but China is then again using oil, using gas to help feed the Russian war machine. Mika.
Okay, all right. Mark, stay on with me. More information coming in. Germany will establish a joint drone defense center following a series of Russian drone incursions into Europe. The center will enable information exchange between the federal government and the states, carry out threat analysis, assess risks and coordinate operational measures. The initiative aims to pool expertise and equip the country to respond collectively to the growing drone threat. Chancellor Friedrich Merz and Finance Minister Lars Klingbeil attended the press conference where the Interior Minister Alexander Dobrindt outlined the plans, emphasizing the need for a coordinated approach to this emerging security challenge.
Ein gemeinsames Drohnenabwehrzentrum einrichten. Ich darf das hier auch nochmal betonen. Dieses gemeinsame Drohnenabwehrzentrum, das soll den Informationsaustausch zwischen Länder und Bund ermöglichen, die Gefahrenanalysen vornehmen, den Gefährdungssachverhalt bewerten und eine Koordinierung der operativen Maßnahmen ermöglichen.
Mark, coming back to you and talking about how Germany has expressed its desire and made a decision of building a joint drone defense center. Again, a question about whether it is only going to help safeguard German territory, or is its expertise going to be shared by the rest of the European Union nations as well? Are they all going to work in tandem to fight against these increased instances of drone incursions, most possibly coming in from Russia?
As you were saying earlier, the Copenhagen discussion today and tomorrow, then in a side discussion, there's Macron talking about the fact that they will have to look at this issue, increase European defense. So they've already said that. One of the things that is fascinating also is when you look at Ukraine, how it has been using drones to then defend itself, and of course against what Russia has been doing in the theater of war. Then this whole question of the future of tanks, etc. As we see, I'm not saying I'm a military expert, but we see the way the technology is changing, and that then means that you can then, as we've seen, you have alluded to this, we look at Poland, we look at Copenhagen, the concerns of Germany, where drones are going to be able to fly backwards and forwards, and how you deal with that, and how you deal with that technically to then be able to take them out of a theater of war. This is a deep concern. And just quickly to say this, also Russia has ballistic missiles, as it's saying the other day, that giving Ukraine a Tomahawk missiles is not just a panacea. The Russians have ballistic missiles as well that can fire into European cities and beyond. So that will be noted by NATO and European leaders. Mika.
Absolutely. Mark Sutherland, thank you very much for joining me on the telecast on NewsX World and sharing your perspective. Shifting our focus to the other news, where United States has now issued a formal security guarantee to Qatar following an Israeli strike on the Gulf state last month. According to a White House executive order that was signed by President Donald Trump, the U.S. will consider any armed attack on Qatari territory as a direct threat to its own national security. The order says that the United States will take all lawful and appropriate measures, including diplomatic, economic, and if necessary, military action to defend Qatar's sovereignty and restore regional stability. This move comes after an Israeli airstrike targeted Hamas officials in Qatar. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has since apologized for the strike during a call with Qatar's Prime Minister, promising that it will not happen again. All right, let's get in John Rosamundo on the telecast with me. John, thank you very much for joining us from Washington, D.C. And let's understand from you with regards to what has transpired in the last few days. The pressure that had been put by the US President for Benjamin Netanyahu to make that phone call to the Qatari leadership, apologize for those Israeli strikes on Doha, and now security guarantees that are being promised by United States of America. The security guarantees are quite significant, keeping in mind that what America says is that if there is an attack on Qatar, it will be an attack on America, and America will be on the liberty of responding to it militarily and diplomatically. How do you see this development, and why is Qatar so important to the US administration?
Well, I think that, Hamas is, Qatar's bread and butter, and Trump needs, Qatar on board to get Hamas to lay down its arms and to end the conflict that it has inflicted on Israel and the region. I think that we have a large base in Qatar. The United States, Qatar's relationship with the U.S. is very controversial in American political circles due to Qatar's funding of terrorist activities around the world.
Right. Also, keeping in mind that Qatar continues to be the key negotiator in the peace talks that have stalled for several months now. There is a new peace plan that has been proposed by US President Donald Trump. Do you think Israel at this point of time is going to be more trusting of Qatar and its ability to hash out a deal?
Qatar has shown time and time again that it's an ally of Hamas. The claim is that Qatar hosts Hamas because of the U.S. government wants them there. But I think that the whole thing is that from the Israeli perspective, Qatar could have told Hamas to release the hostages years ago now.
Right. Absolutely. What happens next? Because while there have been these, hopes that have been pinned on the Gaza peace plan, Hamas has still not responded. There is a time frame of 4 days that has been given by President Trump, but is it going to be taken seriously by Hamas leadership?
Hamas has no interest in surrendering. The supporters of the terrorist organization have been on social media saying that it's tantamount to surrender. Trump's deal, and the idea that Hamas will, just surrender is just naive, and it would rather fight to the last Palestinian and continue the genocide narrative than to lay down its arms and release the hostages.
All right, Mark, thank you very much for joining me on the telecast and sharing your views. Shifting our focus to other developments, Israel's Defense Minister, Israel Katz, has now issued a final warning to residents of Gaza, urging them to flee south as the military tightens its encirclement of the city. Katz stated that those who remain will be considered terrorists and terrorist supporters. The Israeli military confirmed it will close the last remaining route for residents of southern Gaza as they intensify their offensive on Gaza City. Meanwhile, Palestinians mourn the death of loved ones killed in recent strikes, with bodies arriving at Al-Aqsa Hospital in Deir Balah.
نزحنا من بيت لاهيا طبعا بعد ما دمرت. تم تهجيرنا ونزحنا كمان مرة من غزة. قالوا لنا توجهوا على المنطقة الإنسانية الآمنة اللي هي الوسطى ودير البلح والمواصي. للأسف في مناطق آمنة. بنسمع على الأخبار إنه في هدنة وفي اتفاق وكل يوم في قتل وكل يوم في شهداء، ما فيش يوم بصير إلا في 100 شهيد 70 شهيد، بنتصبح بشهداء بنتمسى بشهداء. اليوم
أنا مع وقف إطلاق النار الشامل والكامل ومع السلام العادل في منطقة الشرق الأوسط، ومع وقف الحرب حالا ووقف النار ووقف المجازر، ومع السلام بيننا وبين جيراننا الإسرائيليين، وأن ينتشر السلام في كل دول الشرق.
A makeshift scaffolding set up at a church in Ethiopia has collapsed, killing at least 36 people. The collapse also left another 200 people injured. The incident has occurred in the Arerti town, which is close to Addis Ababa, the capital of the country. According to local media, many pilgrims are still trapped under the rubble and rescuers are working to clear the debris. Health and safety protocols are not regulated in Ethiopia, making construction accidents a common occurrence. A boat accident on the Niger River in southern Nigeria has claimed at least 26 lives. Authorities say the victims were traders traveling to a market in Edo State. Kogi State's Governor Alhaji Ahmed Usman Ododo has expressed condolences and directed agencies to assist the affected families. The state government is also working with federal bodies to enhance safety measures on waterways and prevent further tragedies. People were urged to prioritize safety, avoid overloading and wear life jackets when traveling by water. With that, it's a wrap on this telecast of the World Report. Stay tuned on NewsX World for more news and updates.